Hey guys, miss you. Hope you're doing well. I hope you're on track with academics. And if you are not, that you are reaching out to get the help that you need. Today's lesson is going to be on context clues. And so our objective is to be able to explain the meaning of a word by using context clues from the text. Okay, so by the end of this, we should be able to explain the meaning of a word by using context clues from a text. Okay, so the first thing that we need to ask ourselves or to understand is, what are context clues? Context clues are things that are inside of the text around the word that we are trying to figure out the meaning of that help us determine that meaning. Okay, so context clues are things inside of the text that help us determine the meaning of an unknown word. Okay, so how do we find those context clues, or how do I know exactly what I'm looking for? There are 5 things that you can look for inside of the text to help determine the meaning of a word. And we're going to go through 2 examples and use those 5 things that are going to help you guys when picking out or determining the meaning of an unknown word. And you're also going to reference this word in your packet this week on pages that are dated April 30th and May 1st. And that is activity number 1, lesson 5. And you're going to reread the story Out to Win on page 34. And then you are going to answer questions about the meanings of identified words on page 38 in complete sentences. And we're going to go through that right now. So the 5 things that you want to look for when you are trying to determine the meaning of a word using context clues are your a definition, synonyms, antonyms, examples, and inferences. Okay, so the definition, any synonyms, any antonyms, examples, and inferences. And these things will be found inside of the text around the word that you are trying to determine the meaning of. And so our first example, the word that we are going to use is affable. Okay, affable. And we're going to go through some examples using the definition, synonyms, antonyms, examples, and inferences to help us determine the meaning of the word affable. Okay, so D for definition. Mrs. English is an affable principal. She is pleasantly easy to approach. Okay, so that definition tells me right there, affable means pleasant and easy. Okay, pleasant and easy to approach. Synonym. Synonym means same. So we are looking for words that mean the same as affable. Okay. Mrs. English is quite affable. In fact, she reminds me of Mr. Eli. Do you remember how kind he is? So if I'm looking for synonyms, I'm looking for words that describe something. Okay. The word in particular that describes something in that sentence is the word kind. Kind describes Mr. Eli. If Mr. Eli reminds us of Mrs. English and he is kind, then that means she has to be kind. Okay? She is affable. Affable means kind. Next, we're going to look for antonyms, or words that have a different meaning. I miss Mrs. English. She isn't cranky or unapproachable. She is so affable. Okay? So, what do we know about the words cranky and unapproachable? We know that those people may not be nice, okay? They may not be easy to talk to. And we probably don't necessarily want to talk to cranky and unapproachable people. But if Mrs. English is not cranky or unapproachable, but she is affable, then that would mean that she is approachable. Good. My example is, Mrs. English is an affable principal. If you have a problem, talk to her. Okay? Mrs. English is an affable principal. If you have a problem, talk to her. Well, we know that people who we are okay with talking to tend to be people who are understanding, people who are nice, okay, people who are pleasant, people who are easy to approach, people who are kind. All of the words that we've seen prior to getting to our example, we know that those things apply even when it comes to us talking to someone. So Mrs. English has to be kind if we are going to talk to her if we have a problem. Okay. And the last one is an inference. Okay. Or something inside of the text that the author or the writer implies, but doesn't necessarily outright say, that allows us to um, help us determine what a word means. Inference. You don't need to worry about talking to Mrs. English. She's an affable principal. Okay. So worry comes when we are unsure of how someone will respond to us. If we don't know if someone will listen, if we don't know if they care. But if we don't have to worry about talking to Mrs. English, she is an affable principal. That means that she is a kind principal. She is an approachable principal. She is a nice principal. Okay, so now that I've gone through and figured out, based on my context clues, what the word affable means, I'm going to use my race strategy, which is here, to make sure that I correctly answer the question and fully answer the question. So race stands for R, restate the question. A, answer the question. C, cite evidence from the text. And E, explain the evidence. Okay, so we want to use those 4 steps to make sure that we are properly answering our question. So now I want to explain the meaning of affable, okay? And I want to include the context clues that helped figure out the meaning of the word. So I want to start with restating and answering. So the meaning of the word affable is friendly, okay? Friendly, another word for that could be kind, but I chose the word friendly. The text states that Mrs. English isn't cranky or unapproachable. Okay, this is my evidence that confirms that affable means friendly. Mrs. English isn't cranky or unapproachable, and that you can talk to her if you have a problem. That is my evidence from the text that confirms that affable means friendly or kind. I'm going to go on to explain my evidence by further saying text uses Mr. Eli's kindness to give a synonym for affable. Okay, so it even goes a little bit further and it gives us something directly about Mr. Eli that we can tie back to Mrs. English that will help support our answer. So the evidence tells us that Mrs. English is friendly. Good. Okay, second example. The second word that we are going to look at is nemesis. Okay, nemesis. And we're going to explain the meaning of the word by using context clues from the text. So we're going to start with our definition. Thanos has more than one nemesis. They all work to avenge the lives that Thanos destroyed. Okay, so a nemesis is someone who comes behind and fixes what someone has done, what an evil person has done. A synonym would be a word that means the same. Thor is quite the nemesis. His brother Loki is his rival. Okay, so a nemesis or a rival go against. Okay, antonym. An antonym is a word that is different or not the same. Batman is not Robin's nemesis. he is his associate or his friend. Okay, he's somebody he can hang out with. He's not somebody who he tries to stop or foil his evil plans. Batman doesn't have to do that with Robin. So the antonym for nemesis is associate. My example, Batman is the Joker's main nemesis. He always ruins his evil plot. Okay, so if I know anything about Batman and the Joker, I know that Batman always comes in and saves the day and stops what the Joker is trying to do. So, how does that help me determine what the meaning of nemesis is? In my inference, all villains have a nemesis who stop them from destroying or taking over the world. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily tell me exactly what a nemesis does. It avenges, right? But I have to use my prior knowledge, and I understand based on what I know that if a villain has a nemesis and the villain is the bad person, then the nemesis has to be the person who comes in and saves the day. Okay, so now that I have read through my examples or my context clues and figured out what the word nemesis means, I want to go back to my race strategy and I want to do those letters in order. So I want to first restate the question. I want to then answer the question. Then I want to cite evidence from the text. And then I want to explain the evidence. Okay, so my question is explain the meaning of the word nemesis. Include the context clues that help you figure out the meaning of the word. Okay, so first I want to start by restating and answering my question. The meaning of the word nemesis is to avenge. Okay, so avenge means to come to the rescue, to fight for or against something. The text states that all villains have a nemesis who stops them from taking over the world, and that Batman is the Joker's main nemesis, and he always ruins his evil plot. Okay, that's my evidence. My evidence tells me, well, if all villains have a nemesis and Batman is the Joker's main nemesis, then I know that a nemesis is someone who avenges. Okay. The text discusses now, I'm sorry, the text discusses always, how Thor is Loki's brother, and that is his rival. Okay, so we go on further to explain that a synonym for nemesis would be rival. Uh, it is someone who goes against something. Okay, and the context clues help me figure out that the nemesis saves the day. Okay, so I've used my 5 things to help me pick out my context clues. I've gone through and I've answered my question about the meaning of both words in complete sentences using my race strategy and making sure that every sentence begins with a capital letter and ends with punctuation. If you uh, need additional resources outside of this video, I would encourage you to go to Google and to Google context clues anchor chart, and it will bring up several different options for you to choose from. And this is a replica of one of those anchor charts. And so if you would like to use that, and in addition to this, then I would absolutely encourage you to do that. I know that you guys will do well. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.